Nothing is worse than being in the middle of making a recipe and you don't have an ingredient. Here are helpful baking hacks that will save you in a pinch. If you're making a batch of cakes, cookies, or muffins and run out of baking powder, no need to go to the store. Here's some easy substitutes. Baking soda has 4 times the leavening power of baking powder. So for every 1 teaspoon of baking powder, all you need is a 1/4 teaspoon. However, you're going to need an acid to neutralize the base. Just add double the amount of lemon juice or cream of tartar. This is going to give you that fizzy reaction. Time to bake today. Okay, I guess I can't use these. But you know what? I got some substitutes. 1 large egg weighs about 2 ounces, so you can use 2 ounces or a 1/4 cup of plain yogurt, whole milk, or low fat, with a 1/4 teaspoon of oil like vegetable oil or olive oil. Just combine and add to your recipe. This is really good if you only need to replace 1 to 2 eggs. 1 large egg weighs about 2 ounces, so you could use a 1/4 cup of plain whole milk or low-fat yogurt, or a 1/2 teaspoon of oil like vegetable or olive oil. To make an egg substitute, use 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed, add it to 3 tablespoons of water, and just stir it together. Let this mixture sit for about 10 minutes. It's going to start to gelatinize and create the same emulsion capabilities as an egg. These egg substitutes work best when you're just replacing 1 to 2 eggs, and it'll give you a little bit of a denser product because you don't have those egg white proteins to leaven the baked good. Have you ever made a recipe that used buttermilk and you wondered what it was and why is it in there? Let's find out. Traditionally, buttermilk is the byproduct liquid of churning cream into butter. However, it doesn't really yield that much, so nowadays, manufacturers make it a little differently. Instead, nowadays, you'll find cultured buttermilk, which is milk that's been fermented with bacterial cultures to give a sour, tangy taste and thicker texture. It's often added to baked goods because the lactic acid that's in the cultured buttermilk is going to enhance the flavors of the sugars and any salt that's in the recipe. It's also used with baking soda to create carbon dioxide to help baked goods rise. It's a great ingredient to add when you want fluffy pancakes, tall biscuits, flavorful muffins, cobblers, and pie fillings. Ooh, time to make some buttermilk biscuits. Oh no, I ran out. Got buttermilk? Don't worry, here are some easy substitutes. Make your own acidified milk. Use 1 cup of low-fat or whole milk, and then add either 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, 1 tablespoon of distilled white vinegar or apple cider vinegar, or 1 3/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar. Just stir it in. Let the mixture sit for about 10 minutes. This is going to allow the casein proteins to start to coagulate due to the acids in the milk. This will create a thicker consistency and tangy taste. Plain yogurt. You can add it as a direct substitute, or you can dilute it with 1/3 cup milk and 2/3 cup of the yogurt to make it not as thick. Greek yogurt. It's been strained, so it's very thick. Mix it with a 1/2 cup of milk or water to a 1/2 cup of the Greek yogurt. Sour cream. Dilute a 1/2 cup of this with a 1/2 cup of milk. For a dairy-free or vegan substitute, you can use coconut milk that's been unsweetened and canned, or almond milk or any other plant-based milk. Once you add in the acid, it won't curdle because there are no milk proteins, but it'll make the milk taste sour. Store any unused buttermilk substitute for up to 3 days in the refrigerator, or you could freeze it for up to 3 months.
I can't believe it's not buttermilk.
Can I substitute vegetable shortening for butter in baking? Let's find out. Shortening is composed of 100% fat, whereas butter is about 80% milk fat. The other components are milk solids, proteins, and water. That means you should use 20% less of shortening compared to butter, otherwise you're going to get a really greasy product. Shortening has a higher melting point of 117 degrees compared to butter at 95 degrees. So if you're making cookies, it's going to melt a lot slower, giving you less spread and taller cookies. The only thing is that butter is so much more flavorful due to those milk solids browning in the oven, so it's best to use a mixture of both if you can. Have you ever wondered why recipes add cream of tartar? This little jar of powder comes in handy when you're doing baking projects. Tartaric acid is naturally found in grapes, and there's some left over after the winemaking process. The acid is neutralized with potassium hydroxide, then the powder is ground down and used for baking. It's added to snickerdoodles to give it its characteristic flavor. It's a key ingredient in baking powder to help baked goods rise. It helps to stabilize egg whites like meringues. It prevents sugars from crystallizing in syrups. And if you don't want your cookies to brown like sugar cookies, the acid in cream of tartar will prevent that. Did you run out of cream of tartar? Don't worry, I got you. If you're using it to stabilize egg whites like meringues or macaroons, all you have to do is add a 1/4 teaspoon of either distilled white vinegar or lemon juice for every 1 egg white. If you're adding cream of tartar as a leavening agent in baked goods, all you need to do is add double the amount of either vinegar or lemon juice. For example, 1 teaspoon of lemon juice or vinegar for a 1/2 teaspoon of cream of tartar. Some recipes call for cream of tartar and baking soda added together in a recipe. Instead, you can use 1 teaspoon of baking powder. This replaces a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda and a 1/2 teaspoon of cream of tartar. Baking soda is 4 times more potent than baking powder. Flour is the backbone of all baked goods, adding its unique texture. Here are some common substitutes that you can use. Self-rising flour is an easy ingredient to add to baked goods like biscuits and quick breads. It already has leavening agents like baking powder and salt already added to it. To make your own, for every 1 cup of all-purpose flour, add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt and 1½ teaspoons of baking powder. Just mix them all together before using. Cake flour, it creates a more delicate crumb compared to all-purpose flour. For a simple substitute, just measure out 1 cup of all-purpose flour. Now remove 2 tablespoons of the flour. This gives 7/8 of a cup. Replace it with 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. This removes some of the flour proteins, reducing the amount of gluten formation so that you have a more tender cake. Pastry flour. It's often used in buttery Danish cookies, shortbreads, and tart. The protein content is somewhere between cake flour and all-purpose flour, so you can mix these two together at equal amounts to give you a similar texture. Using natural cocoa powder versus Dutch processed cocoa powder in your baked goods makes a huge taste and texture difference. Here's why. Natural cocoa powder is more acidic and lighter in color. The acid is going to create more rising cakes, but also a little bit of a drier texture. Dutch processed or alkalized cocoa powder has been treated with potassium carbonate. This is going to reduce the acidity level. This powder will taste sweeter, less bitter, and be much more darker in color. Because there's less acid, this is going to give a little bit more dense and fudgy consistency to your baked goods. If you're not sure how to substitute different types of vanillas, here's how to do it. For every 2 inches of vanilla bean, about this much, you'll need 1 teaspoon of vanilla bean paste. This is really great if you're making cakes or cookies and like those little speckles to show up. 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract, or 1 teaspoon of imitation vanilla. Some bakers like to double the amount because once it's baked, you lose a lot of those volatile vanilla compounds. Add a 1/4 cup of melted unsalted butter to 3/4 cup of whole milk or 1/2 and 1/2. Slowly whisk it in to create the emulsion. Now you can add this more rich, heavy cream substitute to your recipes.